Hey listener, on this channel we talk about survive, betrayal, and the moment that change a life in a single breath. So, if you're new here, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comment what can't you think from because it's up the channel more than you think. Now, turn the volume up because I'm about to tell you it started with a bank card so odd the numbers are almost finished. Let's go.
The card was worn soft at the edges. The magnetic strip faded like a bruised memory, and it had sat in my wallet for 22 years without ever seeing daylight. My mother pressed it into my palm a week before she died, her skin papery, her hands shaking against mine like she was fighting the air itself. "Promise me you'll only use it when you truly have nothing left," she whispered. "I promise, because you don't argue with a dying mother, and because I assumed it was some tiny emergency savings account, maybe a few thousand tucked away out of pride. I didn't imagine I'd ever need it. I didn't imagine I'd be standing on a cold morning in front of an ATM on Avenue du Rhône, with 49 euros in my pocket, no keys, no home, and nowhere to sleep that night, finally sliding that relic of plastic into the machine like I was inserting my last shred of dignity into a slot. And I didn't imagine what happened next, because the moment the card clicked inside, the screen hesitated in a way that felt wrong, like the machine had recognized something it wasn't supposed to recognize. It asked for my PIN. My mother had told me the code was my birthday, month and day, so I typed 0708. The display went black. For a heartbeat, I thought it had swallowed the card and died. Then new words appeared, sterile and unforgiving. "Please see a bank advisor immediately." My stomach dropped. Great. The account was closed, flagged, frozen, or tied to something illegal. 22 years is a long time for anything to stay clean. I started to step away, embarrassed and angry with myself for believing in a dead woman's mystery card, when the bank doors burst open behind me, and a man in a suit came rushing out so fast he nearly tripped on the threshold. He was in his 50s, hair neat, face drained of color, a name badge catching the light. Andrew Carmichael, branch manager. He looked at me like I'd triggered an alarm only he could hear. "Sir, please, don't move," he said, breath thin, voice cracked. "I need you to come inside right now." People walking by slowed down to stare, and I felt heat climb up my neck. "Is there a problem?" I asked. His hands were trembling, not the polite nervousness of customer service, but the shaky panic of someone who's just watched a safe door swing open by itself. "The account you just accessed. I have to verify something," he said. "Please. It's urgent." I followed him into the bank, because what else do you do when a manager looks like he's seen a ghost, and that ghost is apparently you? He led me past the counters into a private office at the back, shut the door, and opened a secure screen on his computer. His fingers tapped the keyboard too hard, like force could make the numbers less real. "May I see identification?" he asked. I handed him my ID. He compared it to something on the monitor, then stared at me longer than anyone should stare at a stranger. "Mr. Ward," he said quietly, "when is the last time you accessed this account?" "Never," I answered. "My mother gave me that card before she died. I've never used it." He leaned back as if his spine had suddenly lost strength. Then he said the sentence that punched the air out of my lungs. "The current balance is 468 million euros. For a moment my brain refused to translate that into meaning. 468 million. I actually laughed once, a single stupid sound, because the alternative was screaming. "That's impossible," I said. "My mother was an accountant. We lived in a 2-room flat. She drove the same battered car until it wheezed. She clipped coupons." Andrew swallowed. "The account was opened in 1986, he said, eyes still on the screen like it might change if he looked away, and the original deposits were made in the old local currency, later converted to euros when the system transitioned." He paused, like even saying it out loud sounded unreal. "It sat untouched for decades. Interest compounded, but that's not what makes this extraordinary." He turned the monitor toward me, and I saw my mother's name at the top of a document in crisp, official lettering, Elaine Marie Ward. Underneath, it was a web of legal terms and corporate structures I didn't understand. "Your mother wasn't only an accountant," he said. "According to these records, She was the primary shareholder of a financial holding company called Sterling Crest. The name meant nothing to me, but it hit me anyway, like a door opening in a house I'd lived in my whole life without realizing there was a second floor. He slid another document forward. Sterling Crest was founded in the early 80s, he said. It placed early stakes in technology companies that later exploded into global giants. The value multiplied beyond anything an ordinary savings account could produce. My throat tightened. She never told me. I whispered. She never said a word. Andrew nodded as if he'd expected that. There are instructions here, he said. Specific ones. She requested you not be informed until you personally attempted to use the card. He opened a drawer and took out an envelope, thick, sealed, and yellowed at the edges like it had been waiting in darkness for a long time. On the front, in handwriting that made my eyes sting instantly, were the words, "For Ethan, when he has no other choice." Ethan, that was me. My mother had written my name like she was still alive, and certain I'd one day read it. My hand shook as I broke the seal and unfolded the paper inside. It was old, but the ink was clear. My mother's voice came back to me without sound, and I could almost smell the hospital room, that sterile sweetness of disinfectant and fading breath. My dear Ethan, the letter began, if you're reading this, it means you finally used the card. It means you reached the place I prayed you'd never have to see, and I'm sorry I'm not there to hold your hand through it. But maybe in a way I am. I sat there as the world narrowed to paper in my pulse. She explained that when she was 25, she worked for a small investment firm that couldn't afford to pay her properly, so the founder offered her equity instead. She didn't fully understand it, she wrote, but she took it because she needed the job. Over time, those shares became worth more than she ever dreamed. I could have lived in luxury, she wrote. I could have worn diamonds, driven shiny cars, moved in circles where people smile with their teeth and not their hearts. But I watched what sudden wealth did to people. I watched families tear themselves apart over inheritances. I watched kindness rot when it touched greed. I watched people start loving money more than they loved each other. She wrote about a cousin who gambled away everything. A friend whose siblings stopped speaking after a bitter legal battle. Money doesn't always change who you are, she wrote, but it reveals who you've been hiding. She said she chose to live simply on purpose, to raise me with ordinary values, to let me become humble and capable without the poison of entitlement. And then she explained the part that made my chest feel like it might split. She didn't create that account for comfort. She created it for collapse. She worked with lawyers, she wrote, building structures and instructions so strict they bordered on paranoid, all to ensure I couldn't touch it on a whim. In a good year, when life was easy. You can only truly understand the weight of help, she wrote, when you have nothing left to stand on. She wanted the money to arrive like a rope thrown down into a pit, not like a toy handed to a bored child. If you're reading this, she wrote, then the moment has come. Use it wisely, not to buy empty status, not to chase shiny things. Use it to rebuild your life on your own terms, to regain your dignity, to protect yourself if someone tries to convince you you're worthless. Use it to live, not just to survive. I love you more than any number on any screen. That's the only wealth that ever mattered. By the time I finished, tears were pouring down my face, and I didn't wipe them away. I didn't care that a stranger in a suit could see me breaking apart. Andrew slid a box of tissues toward me like he was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. Take your time, he said softly. I know this is a lot. I folded the letter carefully, the way you fold something sacred, and I stared at the desk as if it might steady the room. That's when the other part of my life surged back into focus, the part that had pushed me to that ATM in the first place. My name is Ethan Ward. I was 46 years old, and 73 hours earlier my wife had thrown me out of our townhouse like I was trash. She was finally taken to the curb. She kept everything. The property I helped renovate, the cars, the investment accounts, even the dog I rescued as a puppy, a mutt named Scout who used to sleep on my feet when I graded papers. Her lawyer, Grant Fenton, smiled at me across a polished table like a man who makes a living watching people drown. He told me, with calm precision, that because the bulk of our assets were acquired through my wife's income, and because my contributions were minimal in financial terms, I would leave with exactly what I brought into the marriage. Which was nothing. My wife, Veronica Hale, Veronica Ward, technically, until she decided I no longer deserve her name, sat there in a flawless designer blazer, scrolling her phone while my life was dismantled in ink. 14 years of marriage reduced to a stack of documents I signed with trembling hands because I couldn't afford a legal war. I was a public school teacher. I taught literature. I believed in teenage minds, in second chances, in the slow work of making people better. Veronica ran a tech company valued at nearly €250 million, and she never let me forget that my world was smaller than hers. 3 days before the ATM, I'd been sitting in our home office helping her polish a quarterly presentation for investors, because that's what I did. I supported her, corrected her slides, caught her mistakes before anyone else could. She didn't say sweetheart or love. She didn't even look up. "Ethan, go get my laptop charger," she said, like she was speaking to a staff member she tolerated. I walked into our bedroom to grab it, and that's when I saw the divorce papers laid out neatly on my pillow like a cruel version of hotel turn-down service. My heart stopped so hard I felt dizzy. Veronica appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, annoyed that I'd found them before she was ready to perform the script. "We need to talk," she said, casual as a dentist appointment. "What is this?" I asked, my voice thin. "It's exactly what it looks like," she said. "I am fighting. Grant already prepared everything. You just sign." I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed where we'd slept for years, and tried to understand what I'd missed. "Why?" I asked. "What did I do wrong?" She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A real laugh. Sharp and clean. "You didn't do anything wrong, Ethan. You're just not enough. I'm 41. I run a company that people write articles about. And I'm married to a man who thinks a nice night out is a cheap buffet and a movie at 9. She glanced at her watch, the expensive one I'd saved for months to buy her for our 10th anniversary. "Do you understand how embarrassing that is?" "I thought we were happy," I said. "You thought," she corrected. "I've been unhappy for years. I'm tired of pretending." She told me Grant was waiting. We went. In his office, Grant Finnan moved through the paperwork with surgical satisfaction. He listed assets like trophies with her name etched into each one. The townhouse, the investment portfolios, the vehicles, the coastal property we use for weekends, all primarily funded by Mrs. Hale's earnings. I said something weak about marital property, about fairness. Grant smiled like I'd told a joke at the wrong funeral. "In theory," he said, "you could argue for more. In practice, Mrs. Hale is being generous. She is offering a settlement of €55,000, provided you sign today and waive all future claims." 55,000 for 14 years. Less than 4,000 a year for the job of being erased. I looked at Veronica, begging for a flicker of the woman I fell in love with years ago, the ambitious graduate student who once told me she admired teachers because they changed lives for something more valuable than money. But that woman was gone, or maybe she'd never been real. Veronica didn't even look up from her phone. "Just sign," she said. "Grant has another appointment." I said I needed time. I said I needed my own lawyer. Grant leaned forward, and his voice dropped into a tone that wasn't quite a threat, but tasted like one. "Let me be clear," he said. "If you force this into court, we will bury you. We will prove your financial contribution was negligible. We will bring witnesses to speak about your lack of ambition. When we're done, you will leave with nothing, except legal fees." He tapped the paper. "The offer expires when you walk out of this room." I signed. I signed because fear does ugly things to the brain, and because I had no idea I was allowed to be anything other than small. Grant handed me a check and said Veronica had booked me a hotel room until the end of the week. After that, I could figure it out. Veronica told me my clothes would be in the garage, that she'd changed the security code, and that I shouldn't try to come back. 14 years, and she couldn't say goodbye. The hotel was a cheap roadside place near traffic and neon. The kind of room where the ice machine is broken and you can hear strangers breathing through the walls. I spent 3 days there in a fog, eating from vending machines, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how a life can implode so completely. The check on the nightstand looked like both a fortune and a joke. In a big city, it wouldn't even buy a year of stability. Rent, deposits, furniture, basic survival. It all eats money like fire eats paper. On the third day, I dragged myself to the bank to deposit the check and try to plan a future, and that's when I remembered the card. My mother, Elaine, died when I was fresh out of university and still believed the world was wide open. She'd been quiet, kind, careful with everything except her love. She worked long hours, drove old cars, never complained, always found a way to help neighbors, always found money for my school supplies, always made me feel safe even when we weren't. The week before she died, cancer had taken almost everything except her mind. She called me close and asked for a promise. Then she gave me the card. "Only when you have nothing," she said. I promised. And I forgot it, because grief makes you pack away the sharp things just to breathe. And now, in Andrew Carmichael's office, with 468 million euros staring at me from a screen like a cruel miracle, the memory of Veronica's face tried to claw its way back into my chest. I imagined her in our townhouse, high ceilings, expensive furniture, champagne that cost more than my monthly groceries, celebrating how efficiently she disposed of her insufficient husband. I imagined Grant Finnan's smile. I imagined that settlement check, folded in my pocket, meant to be the sum total of my worth. And then something inside me snapped into place, not with anger, but with clarity so sharp it felt like cold water. I started to laugh. Not hysterically, not broken. I laughed like a man who has just realized the cage door was never locked. Andrew's eyes widened. "Mr. Ward?" he asked, genuinely worried now. "Are you all right? Do you want me to call someone?" I wiped my face with my sleeve, still smiling through tears. "I'm fine," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I'm actually fine. I need to make a few phone calls. Very important ones." I stood up, feeling taller than I had in years. "And I need the best attorney I can find. The kind of lawyer who doesn't blink when someone like Grant Finnan tries to intimidate them." Andrew's expression shifted, and for the first time he smiled like a normal human being. "I think I know exactly who you need," he said. That afternoon, I sat in an elegant office lined with law books and quiet power across from Victoria Hart, a woman with calm eyes and a reputation for dismantling bullies in court. Her hourly rate would have made my old self faint. My new reality simply nodded. She listened to everything. How I'd been given less than a day, how I'd been threatened, how I'd been told not to consult my own lawyer, how I'd signed under pressure so intense it felt like drowning. When I finished, she didn't look shocked. She looked interested. "That's coercion," she said plainly, "and the settlement is wildly disproportionate. We can challenge it." Within days, she filed an emergency motion to void the agreement on grounds of coercion, unfairness, and incomplete financial disclosure. A court date was set, and while the legal machine warmed up, I used a small slice of my mother's miracle to stabilize my life in ways I've forgotten were possible. I rented a clean, modern apartment in a good neighborhood near a park, not a palace, not a trophy, just a place that felt like mine. I bought solid furniture that was comfortable, not trendy misery designed to impress people you don't even like. I replaced the hollow survival routine with small acts of ownership, cooking real meals, sleeping without fear, walking without checking my phone for threats. I called people I'd lost during the marriage. Friends Veronica deemed unsophisticated. Colleagues she rolled her eyes at. And I called my brother, Ryan, who I hadn't truly spoken to in years because Veronica found his ordinary life embarrassing. He didn't hesitate. He just said, finally, like he'd been waiting for me to come back from a long trip. One evening over a simple beer, he looked at me and said, "We all saw what she was doing to you. You got smaller every year. It's good to see you standing up again." The court hearing arrived on a gray morning. Veronica showed up dressed like a corporate war poster. Immaculate black suit, heels that clicked like weapons, hair perfect, face set in controlled fury. Grant Fenton stood beside her, but the confidence I remembered was thinner now, like a suit that didn't fit. The judge, Naomi Keller, had a reputation for zero tolerance toward legal intimidation. She read the filing, read the original agreement, and then looked directly at Grant. Explain why Mr. Ward was given less than 24 hours to accept, she said. Grant tried to talk about efficiency and reflecting contributions. The judge cut him off with a raised hand. I can read, she said, voice even. What concerns me is the pressure. He was told he cannot consult counsel. He was threatened with ruin if he pursued trial. That does not resemble good faith negotiation. Grant fidgeted. Veronica's face tightened. Victoria stood, calm as stone, and laid out the pattern clearly. The imbalance, the timeline, the threats, the psychological pressure. The judge's decision was immediate. The motion to void the settlement is granted, she said. This goes to trial for proper division. Veronica's cheeks flushed red. She leaned toward Grant and hissed something I couldn't hear. Then, in a move that felt like pure entitlement, she stood and demanded to speak. The judge allowed it, eyebrow raised. Veronica turned toward me, eyes bright with disbelief. What are you doing? She snapped. You signed. You agreed. You can't suddenly decide you want more because you regret it. I stood slowly. Victoria placed a protective hand on my arm, but I stepped forward gently, not to fight, but to speak like a man who finally recognized his own voice. Your Honor, may I respond? The judge nodded. I looked at Veronica, truly looked, and felt something strange. Nothing. No love. No varningreich. Just quiet emptiness, like the last echo had finally faded. I'm not doing this because I want your money, I said. I'm doing it because what you did was wrong. You pressured me because you thought I had no options. You treated me like I was worthless because I earned less than you. Veronica's eyes narrowed. Options. She repeated, like the word offended her. I took a breath. My mother left me something, I said. Enough that I don't need your settlement check. Enough that I can hire counsel and fight properly. Grant jumped up to object, claiming it was irrelevant. Victoria rose, graceful and deadly. It's relevant, she said, because it exposes the hollow nature of their threats. My client is not fighting to survive anymore. He's fighting because fairness matters. The judge watched the exchange with a look that said she'd seen this movie before and didn't like the villain. Trial was set. Full disclosure was ordered. And over the following weeks, the story of our marriage unfolded in court like a long-held breath finally released. Victoria dismantled every argument Grant tried to build. She brought witnesses who spoke about my behind-the-scenes support, the events I hosted so Veronica could charm investors, the nights I stayed up polishing her presentations, the home I maintained so she could focus on her ambition without distractions. Experts testified about the unfairness of the settlement. A therapist spoke about the psychological impact of coercive negotiation tactics. Grant fought hard, but he was outmatched, and you could see it in the way his confidence leaked away day by day. The courtroom was packed when the judgment came. Judge Keller read it without drama. The original agreement was voided due to coercion and unfairness. The marital home would be sold and proceeds split equally. Investment accounts divided evenly. Vehicles sold and proceeds split. Additional compensation ordered to balance disparity. The total was more than I ever imagined I'd see with my teacher's salary. Veronica looked like she'd been slapped, her mouth slightly open, eyes stunned by the first moment in years that reality refused to bend to her will. But the money wasn't the point. The point was watching her realize I wasn't the weak, disposable man she'd convinced herself I was. The point was standing up for myself for the first time in 14 years and discovering I didn't break when I did it. After the ruling, I walked out into pale winter sunlight, and the city looked different, as if someone had adjusted a lens. Victoria walked beside me, satisfied but not smug. You did well, she said. Most people would have taken the original deal and lived with bitterness. I thought of my mother's card, her promise, her long, quiet plan. She told me to use her gift only when I had nothing, I said, looking up at the gray sky. Turns out having nothing was exactly what I needed to find myself again. Months later, my life didn't look like a revenge fantasy. It looked like peace. I went back to teaching because it was what I actually loved, not what I settled for. One afternoon I sat in a small cafe, grading papers, when a woman at the next table struggled with a laptop that refused to cooperate. Without thinking, out of simple reflex, I leaned over and offered a tip. She laughed at herself, tried it, and the computer sprang to life. "You just saved me," she said, smiling with genuine warmth. "I'm terrible with technology." "I'm Ethan," I said. "I'm Hannah," she replied. She was a nurse, recently divorced too, funny and kind in a way that didn't feel performative. We talked for hours, not about status, not about winning, but about life, work, small joys, and the strange relief of starting over. When we finally stood to leave, she wrote her number on a napkin and told me to call if I wanted to grab another coffee. I folded that napkin carefully and slipped it into my wallet, right beside my mother's worn-out bank card. Two symbols of a new beginning, one from the past, one from the future. That night, I stood at my window looking down at the lights reflected on dark water, thinking about the distance between a miserable motel room and this quiet apartment that felt like mine. My mother's money saved me at the moment I hit bottom, but what it gave me wasn't just cash. It gave me options, and options are what abusers and bullies try hardest to steal. Veronica tried to measure me in salary and prestige, and my mother proved, across decades, that a person's value isn't a number on a screen. It's the kindness you show, the work you do with purpose, the courage you find when you finally refuse to be treated as disposable. I still had most of the inheritance untouched, invested wisely, growing quietly like a tide. I didn't need mansions or trophies or expensive watches to feel whole. I needed dignity. I needed peace. I needed the freedom to choose my own life. And I found all of that only after losing everything first. Thanks for listening. If this story hit you in any way, leave a like, drop a comment telling me what moment stayed with you the most, and subscribe for more stories like this, because what comes next is even darker, even sharper, and you won't want to miss it.